Welcome to the Explainer. So today we're tackling a really powerful idea. What if a religion wasn't just a matter of faith, but was actually designed to be a complete constitution for every single part of your life? We're going to explore this concept of a divine framework as God's constitution.
I mean, just imagine that for a second. A single rulebook that covers everything, from the way you pray to how you do business, from big international laws all the way down to how you manage your own money. That's the core idea in the document we're looking at today.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get a handle on what a constitution for life even means. Then we'll dig into the legal-like standards it's built on. After that, we'll see how those standards branch out into two main pillars of action, how they apply to today's hot topics, and finally, how this whole system views other faiths.
Okay, let's jump right in. Calling a religion a constitution is a pretty big claim. So what does the source material really mean by that? Think about it like this. A country's constitution sets up the government, defines citizens' rights, all that stuff. Well, this framework, which the source just calls the religion, is presented in the exact same way, but as the ultimate authority on, well, everything. It's not just a friendly guide. It's positioned as the supreme law of the land for every part of life.
Okay, so every good constitution needs a solid foundation, right? A legal basis. So where do the rules for this one come from? The source tells us it's all built on a specific set of foundational standards.
Now, the source calls this foundation jurisprudential Sharia standards. That sounds complicated, so let's just unpack that a bit. Sharia is the divine law or path, and jurisprudential standards are the core principles you use to interpret that law. So these are basically the non-negotiable, foundational truths, kind of like the self-evident truths in the Declaration of Independence, and every other rule has to flow from them.
All right, so we've got these big, abstract principles, but how does that actually work in the real world? I mean, how do you go from a lofty ideal to a specific rule about, say, a business deal or how you should pray every day?
Well, according to the source, it's pretty simple. The framework splits everything, literally every action, into two big buckets. The first is worshiping, which is all about your personal vertical relationship with God. And the second is transactions, which covers your horizontal relationships with, everybody else in society. Every correct act falls into one of these two categories.
So let's take that first pillar, worship. You can almost think of this as the Bill of Rights and duties between you and God. The source lays out 5 core duties that build this relationship: declaring your faith, the daily practice of prayer, giving to charity, the self-discipline of fasting, and that big community journey of the pilgrimage. And now for that second pillar, transactions. And wow, this is where you really see just how huge the scope of this constitution is supposed to be. It's not just about simple buying and selling. It's laid out as the entire civil and criminal code. It covers the justice system, rules for inheritance, economic stuff like taxes and charity systems, and it even gets into specific things like making an oath or rules for hunting. It's the whole shebang.
Okay, but here's a big question. A constitution that's meant to last forever has to tackle the issues of today, right? So how does this framework handle the unique debates we're all having in the 21st century?
What's fascinating is that the source actually calls out its relevance for our world right now, especially with all the crazy debates you see online. The whole idea is that, in an age of constant arguments and misinformation on social media, this framework is meant to be the solid reference point that cuts right through all that noise.
The claim here is that it provides the final word on some really specific, deep topics related to the end of times. For example, it points to debates about things like the punishment of the grave, the coming of the Antichrist, and figures like Gog and Magog as examples of online arguments where this constitution is meant to lay down the final, definitive answer.
But it's not all about these huge cosmic debates. The framework also gets super specific, right down to your personal, everyday life, giving you the rules for choices you make all the time.
I mean, get this. The source points to rules on things like photographs, singing, and even how you should cut your hair. And including these little details really hammers the point home. This isn't just a book of vague suggestions. It's a detailed, all-in constitution meant to guide every single choice you make, from massive societal laws right down to your haircut.
All right, for our last section, we've got to tackle a huge question. No system of belief exists on its own island, right? So how does this framework see other faiths, especially the ones it refers to as the people of the book?
And this is what's so interesting. The source material doesn't even wait for us to ask. It poses the question itself, right there in the text. It asks point blank about the status of the people of the book.
and makes a point to say that means people of any book, which is a pretty broad question.
And the fact that it asks its own question is a really big deal. It tells you that figuring out this relationship isn't just some afterthought. It's seen as a core job of the system. You could almost say a true constitution for life has to have a clear foreign policy, a section that defines how it relates to other major worldviews.
So where does that leave us? Well, looking at a faith as a constitution completely changes the game. It stops being just a set of personal beliefs and becomes this total blueprint for life in society. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. If every part of your life, from taxes to your haircut, is governed by a divine constitution, how does that change the way we think about freedom? What do you gain, and what might you give up?